More than 10 million Nigerian children are said to lack access to schools, and that is among the highest rates in the world. Available statistics show that a greater percentage of these children live in the northern part of the country. Now, the Almajiri system of education, as hugely practiced in that part of the country for ages, has been faced with lots of challenges, making it unable to solve the problems of quality education. Exposure of children to environmental hazards and deprivation of parental care. It is to mitigate these problems that the former president of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, assented to the National Commission for Almajiri and Out-of-School Children Education Bill. The law seeks to provide for a multimodal system of education to tackle the menace of illiteracy, develop skill acquisition and entrepreneurship programs, prevent youth poverty, delinquency, and destitution in Nigeria. How far will this bill go in solving these problems? Tackling challenges of out-of-school children is the focus of today's episode of Late Edition. I am Ekene Ndulue. Thank you for joining us. And with me in the studio to discuss issues of Almajiri education and out-of-school children in Nigeria is Mohammed Sabo Kiana. He is the founder of the Almajiri Child Rights Initiative, ACRI, a support and accountability non-profit organization that amplifies the call for education and social inclusion for West Africa's most at-risk children. The organization's child protection interventions have reached more than 5,000 children across 15 states in northern Nigeria, and its advocacy campaigns have garnered international attention and partnerships with the Nigerian government at state and federal levels, the European Union, the African Union, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, and the United Nations. Mohammed participated in the Obama Foundation Scholar at Columbia University, New York, and the recipient of UN SDG Action Award. Mohammed is a trained microbiologist with a bachelor's degree from Ahmadu Bello University and a master's degree in development studies from the Nigerian Defense Academy. And also in the studio with me is Dr. Mikailu Ibrahim. He is the education advisor at the British High Commission in Nigeria. He specializes in applied linguistics with focus on early grade reading instruction in education systems and discourse. He was a technical advisor and lead on reading and numeracy activity runner that worked on improving access to education and sustainable reading practices in Nigeria as part of the Girls' Education Project of UNICEF and Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. In the academics, he taught and conducted research on English language and reading instruction at Usmanu Danfodio University, Sokoto State, Nigeria, and the Federal University of Gusau and Zamfara State College, of education, Maru. Gentlemen, you are welcome to the program. Good to have you.
Thank you so much, Ekene.
Okay, let's kick off on the right perspective. You know, when most people hear about the Almajiri system of education, what you visualize is young men with plates roaming the streets and begging. You know, can you put us in the right perspective what this Almajiri system of education is all about before we move further?
Okay, thank you so much, Ekene, for inviting us again to the studio to discuss this important Almajiri issue. So briefly, the Almajiri system of education is a non-formal or informal education system that is commonly practiced in northern part of the country, and the system entails parents sending their children from mostly the rural community to urban centers, to the malams who are like the teachers, mainly to teach them Quran education, that is the recitation of the Quran. Now this is a normal and a usual practice that has been in existence in the northern part of the country centuries ago, you know, way before the coming of the Western education or the so-called formal education that we have now. So it's a normal education system that has really worked in the past and has produced great people and has impacted knowledge and has empowered even a lot of northern leaders, some of the northern leaders we have today, you know. So it was a nice system, but of course with development and with the growth in population, with changes, developmental changes and all of that, the system has turned to what we see that has characterized children being on the street begging because of the lack of capacity of the malam to take care of the children. And so we see them mostly on the street begging and not having the right education. Yeah. Yes. So in a nutshell, this is a brief about what Almajiri system is and what we see also the children on the street in begging in the name of Almajiri.
Okay, at what point of the history did this begging start? At what point did it start moving from the learning aspect to the street begging? Yeah. Or is it part of the learning process?
No, absolutely, it's not part of the learning process. And so if cultural historians would say the point where the begging began has to do with when the colonial masters came and disrupt the local administrative system of governance, where the card and community source of funding was used to support the children, you know. So with the coming of the colonial masters, the traditional governance system that take money from the rich to support the poor and provided support for the Almajiri system within the system was demolished, and the tax system now is being collected by the colonial masters, which refused to recognize the Almajiri system. So at that point, the malam, of course, who don't have the capacity to take care of the children, have to then force the children to go and then fend for themselves. So that's how they began to reach out to community members to seek for arms, you know, to be able to survive. So it was at that point that the begging began. But the begging was never part of the learning. It's not part of the learning. It's circumstantial. The children were forced to beg because there was no support in any way for the system to provide for them. So they're basically on the street just to be able to fend for themselves what to eat.
Okay, Dr. Ibrahim, 10 million out-of-school children in Nigeria, that's according to UNICEF. That's a very huge number. You know, what does this portend if the nation does not start tackling these issues immediately?
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to engage in discussing this very important subject. 10 million children on the street is indeed mind-boggling. And when we are talking about 10 million, we are talking about even a contentious figure, and the contention is around the number being much more than that. Some will say 30 million, And in the most recent count, we are talking about 20 million. When you have this number on the street, certainly the future is bleak for the country and for any context that manages this. One thing about education is access. What we know, and based on what has been discussed earlier, that what signifies these children that are out of school is that they don't have access to learning. They're just there roaming the street, either hawking or doing nothing. What this speaks to is that the children will grow up without the necessary literacy, without the skills to be adults that will be self-reliant and be good citizens. And that is a recipe for indolence, destitution, and will lead to crime and other unwanted situations in the society. And I must say that just taking a step back, what we see today of insurgency around the country, of banditry, is very much linked to that kind of situation that existed before. Only that governments, over time, for whatever reason, have not paid enough attention to this kind of time bomb. When we hear the bandits and insurgents on a daily basis, we realize that they lacked this kind of foundation that these 10 million children don't have today. So what it means is that if this is not taken care of, it means more insurgency and more instability. But the interesting thing is that something can really be done about that. In the case of Almajiri schools, for example, that we are talking about, the British High Commission through the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO, formerly DFID, has been working with partners, especially UNICEF, to introduce a sort of integration of formal education through the education system. As we know, the Almajiri constitute significant part of the out-of-school children. When we are talking about...
okay, I was actually coming to ask you that.
Yes.
In the statistics,
yes.
do you
when we are talking about
okay.
When we're talking about 13 million out-of-school children, Mohammed will tell you, based on some statistics we engage with them, that the Almajiris constitute 8 to 9 million of that number. So you see, the Almajiris constitute a significant part of the out-of-school children. And that is why interventions that I was referring to were really channeled towards the Almajiri schools. And a number of schools were very receptive of the programs, and a number of children were enabled just to make them functionally literate, acquire relevant skills so that in the future they are useful to themselves and to the society. So certainly it's a very negative development indicator to have this number of children, 10 million, on the street.
Okay, when you talked about interventions in the schools, I'd like you to elaborate, what kind of interventions is the British High Commission providing,
Yes, so education programming is about access, is about quality, and about equity. So access, ensuring that regardless of the context, the child is accessing learning. And that learning is of certain quality to equip them with the necessary skills to be useful members of the society. And of course, equity, ensuring that whether they are from poor or rich background, whether they are girls or boys, whether they are able or not, they have some disability, they access that. So then the nature of the intervention is, in Almajiri schools, for example, they learn literacy through Arabic, the ability to read the Quran. And that happens very well in most of the schools, regardless of the situation you see of begging. Hardly a child goes through the system without the ability to learn the Quran. But one major component they are missing is that of functional literacy. So in a country like Nigeria, for a child to grow up and operate effectively, use banking, for example, register formal business, move around cities and make sense of symbols, read newspapers and be conversant of happenings around the country, watch television stations and listen to news so that they are aware, requires much more than that literacy. So they need functional literacy. So what the kind of intervention supports we provide involve supporting those schools to accept integration. So by accepting integration is having some of their teachers who have relevant qualifications to be trained on how to teach, to read in Hausa, English, and do some mathematics. And also dedicate some time out of the school timetable. So the Almajiri children almost read throughout the week. So they dedicate certain days. Some of those I witnessed myself used to be like 2 days in a week, and in each day like 2 hours of learning. So dedicate that time, and then we provide materials for reading to those children, from books to pens to boards that are required. And then the teachers are supported with some allowances to keep on doing that. And that has reached, and one interesting thing is that the Malams who own the Quranic schools, the Almajiri schools, are not in any way resisting this. Okay. In fact, they even make demands so that the whole system works better. Like if you go to most of those schools, you realize that they don't have what we call wash facilities, water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities, toilets, sources of potable drinking water. So in some of our interventions, we respond to those demands, okay. those needs of the schools. So this is the nature of the intervention, and this has been running for well over 10 years, and has actually, like in under GAP 3, at a certain point in the life of the project, we were reaching well over 3,200 schools in 5 states across northern Nigeria. And presently, as part of our PLAN program, PLAN stands for Partnership for Learning for All in Nigeria's Education. We are providing that intervention in northeast Nigeria, particularly Borno and Yobe states, and Kano, Kaduna, and Jigawa as well.
Okay. Yeah. Just at the tail end of former President Muhammadu Buhari's administration, he assented to the National Commission for Almajiri and Out-of-School Education Bill. How significant is this to tackling these issues we are talking about?
Okay. Yes. I mean, we're all excited when we had the news that the president assented to the bill. The focus of our organization, the Almajiri Initiative, for the past 8 years that we established it, was really focused on how do we make this issue a national issue, priority, And so for us, the assentment of the bill to establish the Almajiri Commission is a very significant step. It's almost the answer to our advocacy for the last 8 years, And so if you want to quantify, I mean, there could be some reservation around the commission, but for us, what we said even in our press release after the decision is that we have somebody to hold directly accountable and responsible. I mean, we used to have some reservation around maybe not have another commission and all of that, but we just step back to also see, okay, all those agencies, the education, the UPEG, the Women Affairs Ministry that have been existing, what have they really done around tackling this very specific issue, And so we may say, okay, a new commission perhaps may really be what we need in a way to give the issue 100% attention, 100% focus, So for us, the establishment of the commission could be a stepping stone for the transformative action around addressing the Almajiri child right crisis in Nigeria and the out-of-school crisis, of course. So for us as an advocacy organization that have been championing for for a more serious action to be taken on this, is a welcoming development for us. In 2018, Senator Wamako made a similar attempt. I made a presentation at the Senate to establish this same commission in a way. It didn't walk through, it didn't scale through. So I'm really glad that Honorable Kakale was able to really push it and it was signed. So it's a stepping stone for us, and I think one of the major suggestions we made in our own press statement was that this commission should not exist forever. It should be an intervention commission, and such that it addresses the issue, and then we face it out because of governance that a lot of people were really pushing against. So we wanted to really go into the work that it's been established to do the work, and you know, it's in a way. So yeah, it's a very, very important step as well.
We know the bill was assented to solve the issues of Almajiri education. Well, I'd like you to, out of school children, I'd like you to bring out the core issues. What are the core issues facing the Almajiri system of education as presently constituted that needs to be reformed? Okay,
first, also thank you. Our organization, Almajiri Child Right Initiative, it was deliberately called that because we wanted, so a lot of people think the Almajiri issue or the Almajiri child right crisis is just an educational crisis, but it's not just an educational crisis. It is a whole child protection concern for the Almajiri child, or for a child who has been exposed to the Almajiri system of education. They have to beg every day before they eat, so that is not an educational issue. They lack access to health care if they are sick. A lot of them have died because they cannot access health care. They lack poor living environment. They live in some of the shabbiest conditions you can imagine. They lack parental care. Some of them, as little as 3, 4, 5 years, have been sent to the Almajiri system of education. So they don't have that parental upbringing, parental support, that nurturing of a child, and all of that. So they become exposed, being on the street, and then as a result, they grow up, you know, not having childhood experience that many of us have, you know. So the Almajiri issue is beyond just the education. So it's multifaceted. It has several components: the health, the shelter, the nutrition, even the behavioral, you know, and even as being a good citizen of the country, you know. So for us as an organization, our approach and our focus to the Almajiri issue has been that it needs to be addressed holistically, and all the issues that affect the Almajiri child that I've just mentioned needs to be taken into consideration in proposing a solution to it. And I have done a little analysis to say that if we continue to focus, or perhaps why the interventions in the past have failed to result to a more significant impact, has been because the approach has been focused on education alone. And if you look at the Maslow hierarchy of human needs, education is almost at the bottom.
There are some other basic needs.
There's some other basic
shelter,
physiological need, the parental care that comes right before the education, right? So if we don't take care of, if we don't really conceptualize interventions that will sustainably address feeding, the psychological need, the health need, you know, the shelter need, before attending education, but if you flip it upside down and bring education first, and then we will lose sight on how to sustainably provide those other needs. And so when you fail to address those other needs, the education component will collapse, and that's why the intervention has continued to fail, you know, over the years. So the needs of Almajiri are many, and they are not optional. you cannot just pick one and leave the rest. We must have a holistic approach to providing because it's important for the sustainability of what we want. And what do we want? Education for them. So education indeed is central to it, but it's not the ultimate. And education for interventions that are education central usually not it's usually not been sustainable. That's my own analysis, and I could elaborate further later.
Okay, Dr. Ibrahim, just your input on the kind of reforms you expect this new bill to bring to the issue of the Almajiri system of education. As an educationist yourself, what do you expect?
Actually, I cannot but re-echo a great deal of what Muhammad had already said. That first, this commission is a welcome development. When we talk about old wine in a new bottle, yeah, sometimes it's useful in Nigeria because we have seen how creation of commissions has helped in a number of ways in refocusing on certain thematic areas. UBEC itself is a good example because from the time when UBEC Act was signed into law to date, we have seen significant funding and focus on basic education in spite of whatever challenges. Yeah, so while education is at the center of action for Almajiri, is about other issues around it. In my earlier remark, I talked about WASH facility, that when you go to places where these children learn, by the way, these schools are in certain number that is very high. In Kano, for example, the last census of the Quranic school was around 13,600 of them.
Kano alone?
Kano alone.
13,000 Quranic schools.
Kano alone, yeah.
Okay.
And these schools, wherever you go, you find them in the nooks and crannies of the communities. Some of them will just be sitting, learning in front of a gutter, you know, with mosquitoes all over the place. And the same place they will go and use as convenience. The same place some of them will just use to cook food around and stuff like that. And of course, the water they drink, the toilet facilities may not even be there altogether, whether they are in rural schools or in urban Almajiri schools. So one important need, while the issue of learning is being addressed, WASH facility is really critical, providing good source of water around their school, providing toilet facilities, providing decent accommodation for them.
You may have to hold your thoughts there. We need to take a short break.
Okay.
You are watching Late Edition on NTA News 24. Discussions will continue shortly after this break. Stay with us.
You can't fight piracy, you can't fight a war.
Therefore, you don't claim your rights.
The challenge I see is in the fiscal.
Do we have to wait until we have a problem?
See, the problem with those who speak on behalf of themselves and the country is that they should have facts. I'm speaking now as Minister for Transport.
For you to become economically independent, you must have to curtail the level of importation of other people's products and services.
How rich you are, you can't bring certain vehicle into the country.
There's no competitiveness within the state.
I am Claire Adelabu Abdulrazak. Thanks for joining me.
If you are just joining us, the topic is tackling challenges of Almajiri education and out-of-school children. I still have my guests in the studio. Mohammed Kiana Sabo is the founder and team lead Almajiri Child Rights Initiative, and Dr. Mikailu Ibrahim, education advisor, British High Commission in Nigeria. Dr. Ibrahim, before we went for that break, you were still talking about the situation of things around some of the Almajiri schools you've observed in Kano State.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like you to land on your thoughts.
Yeah, so that's actually in Kano, in Katsina, in Zamfara, in Sokoto, in most parts of northern Nigeria. So this is the situation of the schools. They lack very basic living facilities. When you get into their accommodation, you find the Almajiris in high numbers, hundreds packed in a small room, and you find their little bags hanged within that. So their accommodation is really one thing that needs to be considered. The response to this can be really stratified. Take, for example, the issue of parental care. It's a cultural thing. It takes a lot of engagement and orientation for parents to stop sending their children to this malam, because there is a kind of trust that is there. So while addressing that may not be instant, could be a future aspiration, but the malams also require a lot of training on issues of safeguarding, for example. When we talk about safeguarding, we are talking about protecting children from exploitation, including sexual exploitation. So the malams and all the Almajiri school community needs to also be engaged properly, so that they are aware of the signs and symbols of that. They create an atmosphere for the children to approach them and talk to them about their concerns. So this way, the malams are taking a sort of responsibility that parents are expected to really handle, and being aware of modern challenges that arise with that. A number of observations will tell you that Almajiris may are prone to really abuse, sexual and even economic abuse, because they will be used as child labor in different contexts. So these are some of the issues, safeguarding issues, in addition to health and feeding issues that Mohammed has already actually mentioned. So it's a whole package. So this commission really has great challenges ahead of it. And for us, the reality is that if this committee discharges its responsibility well, it is likely to take Nigeria to greater heights in the direction of developmental trajectory and travel.
Okay, like Dr. Ibrahim mentioned, I'm already seeing the challenges before the commission. Mm-hmm. You know, 13,000 Quranic schools in Kano State alone. How should this commission begin to address, you know, these issues of how they are going to provide a kind of formal learning for these schools? Yeah. Where do they start from? How should they start? What would be your advocacy?
Yeah. So right from day one, when we started our own initiative and advocacy, we were not really focused on providing the intervention and all those education. I was really interested in how do we provide these needs that I mentioned for Almajiri children in their millions, because
they are scattered all over the place. How do you bring them together? Or do you move into the interior parts and how?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. You know, I was really interested on that. So I was not just saying, oh, let me take one school and do and see, you know, because I was really more, because just like he mentioned, 13,000, that's even on the lower side. They are even...
For one state.
Yeah, even in the Kano, it's even well more than that, you know. So the how is really what I have also been trying to really simplify as a fundamental solution to the Almajiri system, right? Now, if you, to answer it more directly, it's going to be chaotic, okay? It's going to be really chaotic. Just really visualize what the doctor is saying. I've been to several Almajiri schools. Some of them is just within this small place. So if you want to, say you want to bring one teacher to be teaching them Where do the teachers stand to teach the children? It's going to be crowded. If you're just trying to visualize it, it's just going to be very, very dramatic. So what do you do? Do you want to start say, okay, let's construct? Where is the space to construct a makeshift something and all of that? So, and that's why we are proposing what we call class. Okay, the class is it's an acronym that has 3 different meanings depending on the short, medium, and long-term implementation or implementation of it. The C in the first and short instance, it has to be means centralized, localized Almajiri school system, and that is meant to address the immediate situation where they are now. Okay, so just like he mentioned, there are 13,000. If you want to provide education, the feeding, just think about it, it's going to be very dramatic and chaotic. It's going to be an administrative nightmare to really do that. I don't know how it can be done anyway. So if you want to, my suggestion of how it can be done is truly centralized number of, say, if we have within this Kariki area 11, have maybe 10 Almajiri schools, right? You then need to centralize them. You then need to bring them together. Now there is a question of saying, oh, they will not agree to come as Malams and all of that. And that's where the definition of reform comes in.
Because I was actually coming to that, wouldn't it be like, wouldn't it come across some of these Malams as a conflict of the culture that they've been used to? There will be resistance at the initial level. How do you overcome all that?
So here is the thing, okay? We have been flogging this issue of resistance by the Malan and all of that. And which is, some people said this Almajiri system should be banned completely. And then there's some people that say, no, it should be reformed, okay? But what does it mean to reform the Almajiri system? What does it entail? Does it mean paying the Malan school fees and providing food, or bringing a teacher to come and teach the children? Is that what reform means? If that is what reform means, with the picture that Doctor highlighted for us, then it means it's not going to work. Reform means removing or adding something to something that you feel is not working, to make it more functional, more performing, and more educating for the children in the case of the Almajiri system. And so a reform will have to go beyond bringing humanitarian-like intervention like feeding, education, and all that. It has to be structural. And part of the structural conversation will have to be, we need to reform the ownership of the Almajiri system. I mean, the Malam is private, it's not government. And if he cannot take care of the children, provide those needs, and if government needs to come in, then it must not be 100% be on his own terms and conditions. Okay, so those are the kind of reform that may need to come in. The existence of multiple Almajiri in a particular community, we need to really to have that conversation. That is the only way I see some semblance of really providing quality and equitable
education
for these children and beyond and all of that. And then we need to also be able to think of how do we ensure that these centers, who are mainly in the city centers, do not become a pull factor for more children from the countryside coming into the system. It's going to overburden the system again, and then they're back on the street again. And that's why we have we have a system change initiative, looking at the issue from the system perspective, looking at the root causes. The children on the street begging are the patterns of the problem, okay? They are the symptoms of the problem. And establishing a commission to provide food and education for them, what are we doing? We're only responding to the pattern and the symptom of the problem, and not the root cause. And then in the root cause of it, there are so many factors. And unless you, I'm not saying the immediate time you will address the whole root cause, but your intervention must be coherent to the long-term intention and aspiration that you want to have, So, yeah, it's going to be difficult to really provide the kind of education one in this current structure of the Almajiri system. It needs to be reformed. And the reform does not mean paying Malam school fees, salary,
but
giving
the
him
reform
food.
is why the National Commission for
And that's why
was formed.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we're hoping, that's what I'm saying. I'm hoping that they don't see reform as providing food and salary to the Malams.
Yes.
They must begin to engage the Malam to ensure that we introduce some structural reform around some of these the structural and the old ways of doing the Almajiri system.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Doc, I would like to get your own solution. I know the bill goes beyond just the Almajiri system. It goes to, tackle the issue of out-of-school children generally in Nigeria. How do they begin to approach these issues? Do you pick the children from the streets? How do you tackle the, do you force parents to send their kids to schools? What is the solution?
Yeah, actually, the starting point is use of data. And it's good to be sensitive to a lot of dynamics. If, for example, you take an average Almajiri school, you find that one that is in rural area may be different from that of the one in an urban settlement. One key example is that most of the Quranic schools that you see in rural areas, they have space in abundance.
Yeah.
So in such a way, if government is willing to do some construction for them, is very much possible. But those in urban settlements may not have much space. If you have to do anything, you have to acquire houses in their neighborhood, which is really very difficult. And whether in urban or rural settlements, you find them of different sizes. From one that has some 20 learners to another that has 100, 200, 300 learners in the same context. From also one that has Almajiris 100%, I mean those whose parents are not living with them around, to one that is mixed with children from the neighborhood who learn and go back to their parents and may even be attending a formal school around there. And there are others that are 100% Almajiris and they don't have their parents around. So there is need for data in every context around the nature of the schools, and that will determine the response. For example, when you take an Almajiri school with 300 learners, it makes economic sense to build a school around there, because how many schools actually, even public schools, have this number and attending regularly? So one good starting point for the commission is generating data and making good sense of the data. The schools in rural settlements, in urban settlements, their characteristics, their ownership, and so on, even their history. Because an Almajiri school that has been there for 100 years, many of them have are much older than the public schools around them. Some go back 200 years within the communities. So you can't compare it with one that was just put in place like 10 years or so. So those that are just very recent may be amenable to what Mohammed is actually proposing, clustered, centralized approach to them. And those that are in small numbers may also be amenable to that, because in fact they are on the verge of annihilation. But when Almajiri school is so populated, when it has a very long history, then the Mahlams will feel that one is trying to take away from them that sense of family pride and whatever. So data and good use of it, good interpretation of it is really critical to that response. The second thing is that the response should not just be centralized. We know that we talk about education being on the concurrent list. That is not the whole function of the federal authorities. Local governments need to be involved. And of course, we know what happens when we talk about the governance with the local government administration, including the LGAs that are part of them. When we mention the number, you know that certainly you can't reach a good deal of these schools without involving the local governments. The state governments, they have agencies that are called SAMES, State Agencies for Mass Education. Some of them have specialized boards that are designed to respond to this. So there must be synergy between this commission and different level of governments, state levels, and to local governments level, and to community level. That is one important aspect of the intervention. If communities are enabled, most of these schools, they have certain routine within the community. The community feels that is affiliated to that school, is connected to that. I think one interesting thing that somebody mentioned is that even among these schools, there is the Harvard standard of the schools and the other lower standards. So that is one. But your question is not only limited to the Almajiri school. It is also directed towards out-of-school children that are not affiliated to Almajiri school. Maybe for issues of faith, for example, there are a lot of children that are not Muslim, but they are out of school for a number of reasons. There are interventions that worked around that, and actually we can learn from them. And still coming back to data, surveys are made as to what are the clusters that accommodate most of these children. If you go to an average local government or state, if you go to GRA, you may not find as many out-of-school children as possible. But when you go to deep traditional part of that community, rural communities, yes. When you go to their markets, when you go to their parks, there, and you begin to take stock of girls that are selling things during the day at a time when children should be in school. Let's say that you go to a community at 11 a.m. Yeah. So if you are able to count certain number of children that are school-aged, that will tell you that this particular place requires a learning center. Mm-hmm. So what are being created in such places are learning centers, and that is based on data. So when you go to such prime schooling time and you find certain number of children that are not in school, either they are hawking or they are selling something, or if it is a rural community, they are going to the forest to get mangoes, to get vegetables, to come and sell. What this is telling you is that a sort of learning center is required in that regard. So data is critical, establishing the number within certain cluster, and then beginning to respond through learning centers. And those learning centers should be enabled to move from one place to another based on what they have achieved of reaching out to children. So I read the bill, and I can see that in terms of operations, the Commission has been given the leverage to be as adaptive as possible in that. So there is need for a lot of homework, workshops and engagements to understand the context and create different modalities. I like the word modality that is also emphasized in the bill. Different modalities. It's not one size fit all. We should respond according to the context of the Almajiris and the context of out-of-school children. Okay,
Mr. Mohammed, from your profile, I've seen that you've made some interventions in the north with regards to Almajiri children. Can you share your experiences with us in that regard?
Yeah, so yes, the intervention that was quoted is across both health intervention, food, and as well as education intervention. And because I know our interest is on education, so I will share the 3 different intervention approach on education we've done. So we have Almajiri schools that, in fact, part of one of our advocacy strategy is education. Almajiri education cannot wait, right? So while we're trying to engage government for long-term policy initiative, we started to do advocacy within the Malams, telling them about the importance of education, allowing this basic literacy to be included in their timetable. So far, so good. We've had a lot of them who accepted that. So currently we have 2 schools in Abuja here which you can go with me, that give us 3 days, you know.
In a week?
In a week.
Okay.
2 hours in the morning, where we teach the children basic numeracy and literacy and other education.
Was that why Dr. Ibrahim called it the Almajiri General?
No, but I mean, this is what I've been doing for the past, you know, many years, you know.
Okay.
So we do that. That's one approach, bringing the education to where they live, okay, helping them with that. That's one education. The second education one is the one that I strongly, okay, so the second one is in Katsina State. This one, it will interest you to know how receptive now the Malams are and be very comfortable with us. The Malam is allowing us to enroll a good number of his students to a nearby public school, okay? So that they can have opportunity to mix with other children, interact with other children, and have quality, non-discriminatory education like every other children, okay? In fact, those children were even benefiting from the school feeding program that those schools were benefiting from, so they interact. But not only that, that approach, okay, allows for measurement of progress in the education life of the Almajiri child. So you have the children moving from class 1, class 2, class 3, and even graduating. Comparing it to the ones that we bring the education to them, where we teach them for a certain period of month, and then we feel that we've either impacted that knowledge, but they don't have any form of certification or anything so that they can progress to the next level of education career, right? So that's second approach. We do that in Katsina State. This Malam, all the children, and then they come back after the school hour, they come back then they do their normal Quran education. He has no problem with that. And I keep telling people that the formal education and the Quran education are not mutually exclusive. They can go hand to hand, they can be learned, the children can learn it together, the Malam have no problem. The only reason why they are not going to school or having the formal education is because they are on the street begging for what to eat. Yeah. So if you can take that away, it means there's enough time for them to, you know, because the Quran education they learn, it's not the whole day that they do it. It's just 2 hours in the morning to, you know. So
they still have time
they
to
still
go
have
to
time.
School.
Yes.
Let me come to
yeah. So let me just end the
okay.
last approach. The third approach is a community-driven one, okay, where we go to the community where these children are really being sent to the Almajiri school. Some of the excuse they give is that, oh, we don't have the formal education, our Almajiri school is not functional. So we try to make the Almajiri school functional and then also establish a school in that. So there's school in Company where we build for 150 Almajiri children that we return to that community. Now the school is serving more than 600 children, both boys and girls, okay? That brings me to the issue of the failure of governance, which I will call it, maybe I can elaborate on that later.
Okay, we don't have much time on our hands, so let me just take briefly. You said you've read the bill, the bill establishing the National Commission for Almajiris and Out-of-School Education. Do you think it's necessary from what you have in the bill? Is it taking out the Almajiri system totally? Is it bringing in a new system of education? What's your analysis?
Well, actually, the bill does not in any way suggest eradicating the Almajiri system, but that improving it, making it better, and then, of course, create pathway for mainstreaming. So if a child through the Almajiri school or any learning center, since we are talking about out-of-school children, also get certain level of education and, of course, certification, then creating a sort of pathway for them to go further for another level of education. There is nothing in the bill that is suggestive of eradicating the Almajiri. And I think that is really, really reasonable. And then one other thing that I like in the bill is the thematic focus in terms of learning. So literacy being first, without functional literacy, and that is why at FCDO we really invest a lot in foundational learning. The ability to read, write, count, and account is key to basic education that a child needs. Then skills, entrepreneurship. So having something, in context where Almajiris learn, there is this desire for self-reliance. So if the package comes with elements of that, of course, it's very well stated even in the caption of the bill. But one thing that I have to say here is that we need to really have a sort of corresponding adjustment in the UBEC Act. The UBEC Act talks about criminalizes parents not taking their children to public school, primary school. So if you now have a bill like this that encourages Almajiri school, and that the UBEC Act does not recognize that as a school and imposes fine and penalty to parents that have not taken their children to school, then you have a sort of conflict that you need to reconcile. So the Almajiri school, we need to start seeing grading coming in. That, okay, this kind of Almajiri school, when we have a child in those schools, then can be counted as in school. Because without that recognition, even the number of out-of-school children that we continue to talk about will not come down. Okay. So you continue to have children in Almajiri school, they are learning the Quran, they are learning literacy, they are learning skills, maybe even better than formal schools. But you continue to count them as out of school. So that adjustment is required actually in other bills.
I'm sorry,
it's
we
fine.
don't have much time on our hands. So this is where we draw the curtain on this episode of Late Edition. I would like to thank Mohammed Kiana Sabu, founder and team lead, Almajiri Child Rights Initiative. Thank you for your expert opinion.
Thank you so much.
And also to Dr. Mikailu Ibrahim, Education Advisor, British High Commission in Nigeria. Glad to have you on the program.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
And I am Ekene Ndulwe. Thank you for watching.